Right, we are recording. Let's get going. Today's coffee break, I'm delighted to welcome Judith to come and join us. Wow. Judith, one of our members, has been for a long time, talking about her experiences of establishing a very successful women's network at Metro Bank. But before I pass over to Judith, I thought just be interesting. Can I have a show of hands? How many of you are involved in the women's networks at your firms? How many maybe have established them? What's your involvement around here? Just a show of hands if you're involved in your women's network at your firm. Amelie, brilliant, and Angela, fantastic. So. Two of you, only two of you, that's a surprise. Amelie, I'm going to pick on you because you've got your camera on, and I'm going to come to Angela in a minute. What's your experience of your women's network at Elgin?
So I joined, so we have established we call them women in investment circles. At my firm, we've got 3 of them. I think we're expanding with operations right now, but basically, there weren't many of us on the investment floor, so we thought let's make sure we get to know each other a bit better and exchange ideas, thoughts, talk about anything career progression, mental health, gender diversity, and that started about 18 months ago, and we kept going during the lockdown, and that was really helpful. A lot of us were struggling with being overworked, mental load, and things like that. And I've recently joined the Gender Diversity Committee, but it's very, very early days, so I can't say much about this yet.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Emily. And Angela, what's your involvement been? And so I can't remember where you work.
I work at Invesco.
Okay.
So I am involved, so I was involved initially in the Women Network, which then somehow evolved to first include also men to get more allyship, to bring the message that it's not just a women thing, is a shared point of conversation. And then there were a lot of initiatives going on, but then they were also crossing over with the diversity inclusion program, of which I'm also part of. And so the two networks, the two groups somehow are sometimes I cannot see which is the distinction between the two, because there is a lot of interconnection between the two, and also we say most of the time the people working on the two are kind of the same. So yeah, there is on the diversity inclusion program especially, there is a lot going on. I'm in particular involved in the ethnicity working group, but there is also neurodiversity. Gender is not so much talked about. They will talk also about well-being, mental health, returners to work, early careers, all these work streams are.
Angela, thank you. I think we'll pick up on some of those themes as we go through the day, and particularly the one that's particularly of interest to me is getting men involved. And should we be having women's networks, or should we be having something else? Right, Judith, welcome. Lovely to have you here. Obviously, you've got an understanding of the audience here. Before we get going, let's talk about Metro Bank. They've been on our high street now for 11, 12 years, I think. And you've been a leader in the audit department there for 8 or 9 years, I think, so almost since the beginning. And they're a very different bank, where people are, other banks are closing high street branches. You're opening high street, and I think you call them stores.
Yes, we do. Thank you for having me, Mark. It's great to be here. Yes, I think if you're not aware of Metro Bank, as Mark said, we're the first sort of new retail bank on the high street in over 100 years. And yes, we've been there for the last 11. My 8 years at Metro, I haven't always been in audit, Mark. My background actually is operations. I'm sort of a real back office girl, and I've been in 30 odd years in operations across legal and financial services firms. So yeah, stepped into Metro Bank in 2013, so a very young, new organisation at that point. And I stepped into their operations, their lending operations function. My 8 years has seen me sort of move from that operations role through change. And yes, now I'm in internal audit. Not going to say too much more about me, just that I'm a working mum. I have been for 27 years. That clearly means that my kids are grown up and they have careers of their own. So that's sort of one of the reasons, I think, behind my motivation for getting involved with WOW and our women's network. But just back to Metro Bank, we're, as I say, that retail bank. We're a community bank on the high street. Our focus is really on providing amazing service for our customers and convenience. We're sort of there when other stores, other branches, other banks aren't. With our opening hours, we're open on Saturdays and Sundays too, and after 5:30 our stores are open until 8 at night. So really catering for our customers who need to do their banking out of hours. We absolutely have our digital channel and our mobile banking channel as well. So multi-channeled, and yes, a real challenger to the high street banking. We do call our stores. We've got a huge footprint now. We started off 11 years ago just sort of in and around London and the M25. We've expanded down the M4 corridor out to Wales. We're as far north as Manchester, and actually, yes, sort of stores being opened sort of through the Midlands as we expand our sort of network across the land. Talking about culture at Metro, you've probably heard me say amazing a few times. You'll notice that at Metro we have our sort of buzzwords, if you like. I'm going to duck. WOW is one of them, but actually very nicely sort of translates. It wasn't for this reason originally, but our women's network that was established around about 2014, 2015 is actually called Women on Work, and ties very nicely back to that WOW buzzword. But amazing is an acronym for our behaviours that underpin everything that we do at Metro Bank. Of course, very customer centric. It is all about customer service, and the amaze part very much, I think, leads to that, about attending to every detail, making every wrong right, exceeding expectations. It's all about our customer and that focus. The ING is actually inspire, nurture, and gain change. And I think from a sort of a leadership point of view, that's what we instill in and undertake in everything we do. I feel really lucky that I work for this organisation. Obviously, I've been around the block a bit. I've worked in other places, but to work for an organisation that has such a sort of inclusive culture, and that's not just gender. I mean, it's really interesting to hear, your comments about, oh, it's not just about women. It's it's the other things. We actually have 4 main networks at Metro Bank. As I say, WOW, Women on Work, has been around, I think, the longest. We also have Embrace, which is our BAME network. Pride, obviously, LGBTQ+. We've got Parents. We've got lots of working mums and dads at Metro Bank. And actually this year, very soon, we're going to be launching Body, which is very much for our sort of disability network. So across those networks, we have a lot of intersectionality. There's a lot of crossover. And actually, as chair of one of those networks, we all join together in our inclusion committee. So you can see the sort of structure that's going on. I think, yeah, I've been involved for much of my time at Metro with WOW, either on the committee or just as an ambassador, just, you know, promoting, making sure people know that events are going on. Usually that's been dictated by my sort of day job. If it was busy and not enough time, I've sort of stepped back a bit. But yes, from the start of this year, I was appointed the chair of WOW. So I'll perhaps talk to you a little bit about my sort of personal journey and what that felt like, stepping in and making the decision to sort of step up and lead our network. I think, you know, culture is out there. Everybody's talking about culture in their organisations. I think, you know, as far as inclusion, D&I, diversity and inclusion is concerned, you know, yes, that's right up there on everybody's agenda. And I think, you know, in July this year, the regulators for sort of regulated firms have now launched their discussion paper on diversity and inclusion and improving it across those regulated firms. So, you know, everybody's been turning the dial up this year, not just at Metro Bank. Yes, we're probably further down the line than most of you on this call if you're thinking about your organisations. I think that does evolve over time, and saying, you know, I'll use the phrase turning the dial up. That has been the key thing for this year. And I think a real statement of intent that we actually have hired into the bank. We have our Director of Colleague Experience and Inclusion. And I think actually, you know, the arrival of that person, you know, that colleague on the pitch is really giving us sort of direction and focus to take it forward.
Judith, can I just say, let's wind this back a little bit to when WOW was formed. You know, it's interesting, Amelie saying there about how the start of her group in Elgin was a few women on the trading floor getting together, and it's sort of evolving out of that. And that's certainly one way that networks start. The other way that I've seen is, you know, they're formed very deliberately by the firm and given an objective and a remit. How was WOW formed?
I think,
what do you think of the differences?
Yeah, probably somewhere in the middle. I think sort of back in those early days, the sort of inception, the origin probably was, you know, looking at the women across the organisation. We've always been, I'm going to say lucky enough, that's not really the right terminology, but we've always had a good number of women in our exco. And so I think it was, there was a sort of focus on, yes, we need to do this for women across the business. And it was formed, you know, very much with an exec sponsor and a committee and that formal structure. So I think we did probably sort of jump in somewhere in the middle of the two. I think the more sort of informal way in, I think it's right, you know, actually for women in any business, any organisation right now, that, you know, that we do offer each other support, etc. So even if you're just starting off in your small informal group to get something going, that's a great space to start. And obviously, if you can engage with your company execs, get them on board as well. The thing that's really struck me this year while I've been in the chair is just the support that is out there. If I speak to any one of our sort of exec or our senior team, there's so much support behind, and I find that really surprising. I think sort of going back to that thing of being a woman, we don't like to ask for anything, etc., but actually just putting myself in front of those people, men and women, I've been really really surprised by the support that's there. Amelie, I can see your hand up for you.
Emily, you're mute.
There we go. No, I just wanted to make a comment because I find that the people involved with the women in investment circles that I'm part of, and the people involved with the gender diversity committee are two types of people. So a lot of us have ended up joining the women in investment circles because we wanted a safe place where we can talk about any issue that affects us on a daily basis, whether they might be related to gender diversity or not. So last session we talked about crying in the office and how men tend to freeze when the tears come out, and we're trying to explain to them that this is a very natural way for us to vent out our frustration, and that doesn't mean that it's an HR issue. We have cried, and that's okay. We move on. And there was actually a strong desire not to open up the groups to bigger groups and to the rest of the organization, because it's very much our space. Obviously, with the gender diversity committee, on the other hand, is very much how can we talk about it? How can we improve the culture of the organization and the awareness? So there's very two different streams. I just wanted to flag that, and I was wondering if this experience was similar to yours, and whether you feel that the more intimate circles need to continue to exist within that context. I found them useful, but I appreciate it's not everyone's experience. Maybe.
I think you're spot on, and we've definitely found that. I think going back a couple of years, we had. I'm going to say we've always had a sort of token man on our committee. Actually, one of the things as I was sort of preparing for my interview, it's an appointed role, the chair role, and I sort of looked around the committee, which actually is quite a large committee. We've got around 20 people on the committee, and I suddenly thought, prepped for my interview and thinking, my goodness, we're not very diverse. One of the things about our culture is to have diverse committees. So that was something that I sort of called out straight away. And actually through this year, we do have men on our committee. We've expanded, and I know, Mark, it's really your topic, male allyship. And Mark came along and spoke on an event for us, joined us for that in June. So I think we've always had male allies, and we definitely have male allies across the organisation. Where I think this sort of came possibly to a head is that WOW as a network, we run mentoring circles, and we've set up our 2021 cohort sort of mid-year. And actually, one of the things that we debated as a committee was actually, should mentoring circles be just for women? Who are we there for? And actually, this year is the first year we've got 5 circles running. One is actually being led by a man, and we actually have mixed groups of mentoring. And I think it is quite interesting. I mean, people have a view, and even across my committee, people had a view. Across my mentors, the female mentors had a view as to whether, what are we providing? Are we providing mentoring for women? But I think when we talk, and Mark, we've said we'll talk about it perhaps towards the end, a bit more about male allyship. But, for me, in my journey this year, I think we need men to come with us to truly level the playing field. Men have got to be there and they've got to take a part of that. That said, as a woman, I think you need to have your support groups. You need to have your safe colleagues, your safe person to go and talk to. And sometimes that does come from being the same sex, because actually we've talked quite a lot about the different language that women and men use. We just ran last month an event on women's equality, and talked about sort of, well, the journey so far over the last 100 years, but then actually talked about our data and what it looks like at Metro Bank. And we run quarterly sort of voice of colleague questionnaires. And as a network, we've sort of dipped in and had a look at those responses, the verbatim responses that colleagues put on those questionnaires. And actually, we've seen quite a difference in the language that's used. So I think there's a place for both. I think you definitely need your sort of female support group. But I think to actually level the field for equality, you definitely need to take men along with you.
Emily, how do you and you use the example about crying in the office. If you're in a closed group of only women, and you're talking about that, you can have a great conversation, and maybe it is just the talking about it that is all you want to do. In my nature, I want to take some action out of that. I want to, you know, how do you balance that paradox up of keeping it in the group or training me on how to react?
You're spot on. I think, and part of the reason why I wanted to join the Gender Diversity Committee is that I wanted to sort of join the dots, and the conversations which are happening in an intimate, sort of anonymous, almost context could be brought up to the rest of the organization. So that's what the Gender Diversity Committee group is supposed to do. So where we're trying to inject instill some new ideas, which is why I'm so delighted I've joined the session today.
Good. Sorry, Judith. No,
that's fine. I was going to just, as you said, sort of generating new ideas. I mean, just to tell you, I mean, I think going back about how to really get these networks to take off is you know, absolutely try and get yourself an exec sponsor. We actually have a male exec sponsor, which makes perfect sense, and I think we should have. He's incredibly supportive, but I think, you know, choose your sponsor to really get sponsorship and support for your network. I think be really clear about your purpose. You know, we have, you know, really defined what our purpose is. You know, it's to focus on, you know, the issues that matter to women in the business, or those who identify as women. That said, we sort of follow up with the in brackets and actually, you know, others who might be interested in those issues, and actually people who support the female agenda, because I think we have to cater for our male line managers, and you know, you've got to have everybody along and listening. Really, our key purpose is, you know, supporting members on their career journey. We do a lot of you know, sharing career stories, you know, just sort of having a look at different functions in the bank and getting, you know, sort of senior or junior women. There might be people who've just moved into the roles to talk about their career journeys into that function, promoting and supporting well-being, obviously the sort of health issues. Specifically, you know, female health issues. We're doing a lot on the menopause right now, and I know you had Kate Usher along last week to talk about the menopause. So we've got lots of initiatives running there, but also I think it's important as a network that we act as a barometer and a sounding board for the business. So again, you know, talking about the menopause, we've just run a survey. Actually, men and women have responded to that survey, which is fantastic and sort of incredible response. But we actually have to feed that back into the business. This is about making our business better from the sort of female lens perspective. So I think, you know, the other thing that we've done, we do have a big membership. So we've surveyed them. What are the topics? You know, what do your people want to hear about? What do the women in your workplace really want to hear about? And then our events and printed content through the year, we've sort of focused on those topics.
Judith, just before you move on to that, can we just wind back a little bit again and let's talk about purpose. And Angela, I'd be interested in your experience at Invesco. If I was the exec sponsor, your exec sponsor, and you came to me and said, you know, I'm establishing a women's network, what did you say, or what would you say today was the purpose of that from a business perspective? You know, am I going to be an exec sponsor because I'm ticking a box and it's a nice thing to do, and you know, 50% of our employees are women, or am I sponsoring that because I want to take learnings out of it and change the business and move the culture from it? What's the purpose?
Sorry, was that to me? Or?
So Judith, yeah.
Yeah, I think our purpose has evolved over time. We revisited purpose at the beginning of the year, and through our committee talked about exactly what it was. I think from as you say, an exec sponsor, I mean, the reasons for an exec sponsor standing up, I'd hope it isn't just because they're ticking a box.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it absolutely is that top-down culture, you know, really sort of awareness, recognizing change, recognizing that this is the direction and the way that the organization needs to travel. So across our exco and across those networks that I mentioned earlier, you know, we've got exco members who are sponsors all the way through, and driving that change, driving that culture to sort of establish and embed that culture all the way through, top down.
Yeah, and Angela at Invesco, so you've just moved across my screen. Have you executive sponsors, purpose? How have you defined it in Invesco?
So the thing is that I think that the women networks are probably the first one to be established in an organization, because the simplest way to structure or slice and dice an organization is a male and female, and there is a recognition that especially female do not get the same opportunities as our male colleagues. So this was sort of the first low-hanging fruit to tackle the issue, creating an environment where there could be supporting, increasing visibility, creating some initiatives, all in these directions. But then over the time became very clear that I am a woman, but I may be Black, may have also some neurodiversity issues, maybe return to work after maternity, all these sort of things. So there are all these different facets of the diversity inclusion. So it's kind of difficult to making siloed in a just women network, or just this other point. So it's more fluid, and as Judith was mentioning, it evolves over time, the focus. Mentoring programs are one of the first initiatives within Women Network. Typically, I've been part of it on both sides, and it's very important. But at the same time, mentoring evolves within the diversity inclusion. We have now diverse mentorships program, internal and external to organization addressed to Black people. So it's an evolving topic, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Judith, I've completely put you off your stride now.
No, that's fine.
Angela, thank you.
I just think it's interesting that how Angela's explained that, and I think you're right. I think data plays a big part in this. I mean, I think it's very easy for organisations to sort of distinguish between gender, but when you get down into, obviously, sort of race, etc., the different diversity groups, do the organisations have all of that data to be able to segregate? And I think that's something we all struggle with, really, and particularly, because that data isn't necessarily captured, and it is sort of building that up. I don't know, Amelie or Angela, whether you've found that as well.
Yes, absolutely. There is this initiative of gathering data across the organization at global level, like a Count Me In is called, when everyone should say how they see themselves in terms of gender, ethnicity, background, all these sort of things. But it's very difficult to get response because of very different reasons, because privacy, people do not want to share, people do not trust. Why are you asking me? What are you doing with my data? And this depends on where you are in the globe. So it is difficult, but at the same time, if you do not have the data, you do not know exactly how your group of employees is made of. So, and therefore you do not know which initiatives should play a bigger role in your pipeline, in your long list of potentially good, we don't know, and so on. So data is a very important point.
I mean, we've to a point of actually struggling to quantify our membership. How across those networks, how do we actually quantify our membership? And at the moment we're looking between obviously the colleagues who attend events is an easy one, because we've got that way to do it, but we also use Yammer as a sort of colleague communication network, but then you're sort of asking someone to join a group, and not everybody uses it, etc. So sometimes it's really quite hard to work out those membership numbers and the data. Amelie, I see your hand again.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. We share similar challenges on the data front. I'm wondering if surveys are a way to accumulate more data. It's not as scientific, because obviously surveys get only as good as the number of responses that you're getting, but at least it's a way to sort of gauge or measure the temperature in the business with regards to sensitivity around these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We do use surveys. Towards the end of last year, we surveyed the membership, really just for feedback. What do you want us to do going forward? And at the start of the year, we did a survey that was really, what do you want to hear about? And it was actually the responses to that from a topic point of view was really interesting, and has really driven some of the conversations that have been going on this year, either as events or just sort of printed articles, etc. But equally, where as a network we might need to work with our people team. I know, again, intersectionality, we've got our M Parents network, for working parents. And actually something that came out in my survey, in the WOW survey, was actually about our maternity policy, and so actually the two networks together have sort of been working on that, and taking that forward with our people team, and looking at, we do a lot of sort of shared sort of paternity or parental leave from Metro. So it was really good to have that sort of steer, that direction, that people really wanted to hear about that. And we actually ran an event a couple of months ago and had colleagues, including a guy who had been on paternity leave, sort of tell his story. I think it's really powerful when colleagues tell their story, so we use that quite a lot. I think the other use of survey, as we said earlier, doing a lot on the menopause right now as we come up to October and Awareness Day, and sort of back from July, we've sort of drafted our initiatives and where we wanted to take this, and the change, the sort of game changing, back to that ING on the back of amazing, the game changing that we wanted to do across the organisation for menopause. And actually the survey was sort of left to sort of bubble along through August, and actually sort of looking at it in September, I think it's just incredible that the number of respondents that we had on that. So I think surveys are a good way to really feel, as you say, what's the temperature, where do people want you to go, and that helps you direct the initiatives and the work that you're putting in. I think I suppose I was just going to sort of go to some recommendations, I think, to oh, actually, Ola, is that your hand up, or maybe not? I was just going to sort of talk about some recommendations or things learned, really. I think for anyone that isn't involved, or their organisation doesn't actually have a network for women, or even just those small support groups, I would definitely sort of get involved with that. Ask questions, call out the fact that you don't have a women's network. What can you do? It could be really small things. I think we're all busy with day jobs. The chair of WOW role is off the side of my desk. That's fine. I juggle. But yeah, I mean, just do the little things, because the little things actually will make a difference. And I think it is about making a difference for women in our organisations. So just opening up the conversation. And it might be something that's, it doesn't have to be contentious, just share your career stories, or share your lived experiences about, something that's topical and happening. But I think that will sort of help you get going. And I think my motivation very definitely was, about making a difference. I think as a leader anyway, when I've led teams in the past, I've always wanted to, make the system better, or the processes better, or just do something that made people's lives better and easier while they're in work. And I think actually, that's very much, us as women, we need to be doing that.
Judith, thank you. Thank you. Amelie, you just came off mute. It looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, I had a question. So when we think about putting together events along the line of career management, I don't know, personal branding, thinking, topics like that, is it better to target them at women exclusively, or does that foster a culture of women versus men, and this is women's forum, and this event is not open to anyone who is not a woman? Is that something you would recommend, or you would recommend to stay away from?
I think I would say I would say stay away from. I mean, we open up our events, and as I said, even on our purpose, we say, the purpose is that, who are we for? We're for women and people identifying as women, and talking about those issues. But in those brackets, very close afterwards is, but actually we'll welcome anyone. And when we sort of do flyers for if our internal events that get sort of circulated around, and we always say it's open to everyone. I think thinking across the events that we've had this year, we've actually, tragic events back in March, Sarah Everard, we've had several sort of initiatives around our safe spaces run through our stores. But actually we ran with our sort of physical security team, they came along, we ran a sort of personal safety event. And some of the, there's lots of men on those events, and actually going back to, Mark, male allyship, actually, if you look across the men in your organisation, they will be husbands, dads, actually all of the men will have, women somewhere in their lives, brothers, etc., etc. So we actually do end up with a lot of men on our events, and even sort of the sort of Yammer posts that we post, and again going back to female health, menopause. I've been absolutely blown away by the men that have come to me. I sort of posted and then started getting quite senior men phoning me up and saying, oh yeah, my wife. And actually just that understanding. So again, yeah, I sort of feel that you need to have men along with you. I think if you do say it's women only, it's maybe gets a bit them and us. I think, again, you could run something that might be just for women, but I think you have to cater for the wider.
Yeah, it could be marketed as an event organized by a gender diversity committee, but open to all.
Absolutely.
I think it's a hugely interesting topic, and I'm not sure that we've come to, there's no right or wrong here. I think it's quite interesting. I mean, Judith, you mentioned Sarah Everard and safety events. We shouldn't assume that every man walking the street late at night feels safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we don't. Likewise, and we were talking about surveys earlier. I was talking to a head of HR the other day who had done a survey about whether people feel that they can bring their whole selves to work. And I forget the exact numbers, but about 90% of the men said that they could, and somewhere around 50% of the women said that they could, which meant that 50% of the women thought that they couldn't, which was a big problem. But then looking at it from the man's perspective, when he started talking to the men about this, actually most men hide things at work. Most men can't bring them whole selves to work. It's just we like to tick that box and say we can. So we might be hiding back our political views, our love of a minority sport, or the fact that we don't actually like football and beer at all. All of these things are inhibiting men from getting involved in these subjects. And I think it's important from the Women's Network perspective to look at actually how they engage with men, and recognize that a lot of the topics that they're talking about are equally appropriate to men, and not just opening them to men, but making them inclusive to start with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, going back and saying, back in March, we sort of opened up through our stores the sort of safe spaces initiative. And again, it's saying, you know, yes, okay, that came from actually some of my committee members were very quick to come out and say, we need to do something. And again, everybody got behind that. But Metro Bank is a community bank, and actually what we put out on social media, it's sort of safe spaces. Everyone should feel safe and have a place to go on our high street, which is where we were offering our stores up to say, you know, we're open late on the high street or until 8 o'clock. You know, we will be a safe space. I think as well, I think, you know, some of the topics that come up are not just women's topics. I mean, coming up from an awareness day perspective, you know, it's sort of pregnancy loss, you know, that side of things. That's not just something that women go through, men go through that with them. And I think in some ways to have an event that is exclusive to women doesn't actually do us any favours. I think we should be catering for the male side as well.
Brilliant.
Wanted to ask a question or make a comment as well on women's network. I've been working for many years with DTCC, for example, where I was part of the women's network. Sometimes what could be difficult is that the women's networks being the oldest networks or one of the oldest networks, sometimes you reach a point where you lose traction because there's no more topic to talk about, or losing credibility. So what's next? And I had two comments or questions. One, which I really like that you mentioned, Judith, is the feeding back and the credibility of a network to say, yes, a network is powerful because it can make real changes. And it's not just set up for the sake of the company to say, oh, I'm diverse, I've got a women's network. It is making changes, and it's due to the community of people working on the women's network. And then the other one maybe is the capacity of a women's network or any network to renew itself or to evolve with time or to link up and to know when you reach the point where you're no longer, you lose your purpose, or the purpose is no longer valid, or it's out of date, to be able to move on into something else and to reshape yourself.
I think just sort of addressing that to start, you know, our committees are formally, you know, sort of formal governance. We've got a terms of reference, and that does get reviewed and renewed, and I think it should do. I think that point about, you know, we're going to get stale. I think the same with the purpose. You know, we should do that. As an organisation, though, I think our membership probably keep us current. I mean, clearly that does flow. You know, the members won't be the same now as they were sort of 5 years ago. Our committee isn't. You know, we've sort of Q3, Q4 last year, we had new committee members join. They're encouraged. I think, you know, we're not all senior women in the organisation. We've got a diverse spread across the committee of those younger committee members who have come on to shape our network and take it the way that they do. And I think that's around succession as well. You know, the chair role has a tenure, you know, sort of 2 years, and then it will change. But I think that's it. It's about keeping it current. And I think that's where the surveys come back, because your membership does change. And actually the main thing about our network is that we should really be listening to what our members want. You know, it's not really for the committee to decide where we're going and what we're talking about. Topics that come up, you know, and I'm sure, Mark, you'll say the same thing, you know, imposter syndrome comes up time and time again. And we'll sort of keep rolling that out. Interestingly, for me, I know, you know, it's not just women that suffer from imposter syndrome. You know, men have it too. And I've had you know, a conversation while we've been on an event in a chat line with someone saying, I don't, you know, a man saying, I don't want to post my question, will you post it for me? And basically coaching him through, no, come on, you do it, it's fine, I'll be right there behind you. And he posted it. So I think, you know, we aware that the membership will change. They may have the same issues, topics to talk about. There may be new ones. But yeah, I share, you know, the future, what next? For us at the moment, I think it's this year, as I say, turning that dial up. It's still going strong and it's getting good feedback. And I think by listening to our members, we're giving them what they want. So hopefully they'll keep coming back.
And the other aspect of things which I find interesting is to see where, obviously, because women's networks have been alive for a while now, there's been lots of topics which have been covered. What would be great is to see the newer generations of women coming up with new things rather than ending up with the same questions, the same debate, and the same or in similar ways. I don't know if we have data now to show this progress, but I don't find it obvious. I still feel like the topics are still the same and the struggles are still the same, and that worries me slightly.
I think I'm sort of conscious on time, but I think it's interesting because, you know, sort of saying my career span, you know, 30 plus years, we've come a long way. But I think, you know, we've still got a long way to go. I think at our equality event last month, I think it was quoted, it'll take 108 years to get equality. I think that various numbers of years in the hundreds have been sort of quoted across that. I think the topics do go round cyclically because I think they're still there. And just, you know, last weekend having a conversation with my daughter who, you know, in her career, and she sort of said, I need to tell you about this weekend because actually I'm in a meeting next week and it's me and 20 men and I'm the most junior and it's the same, exactly the same thing round. So I think until, you know, and we probably won't be here, well, we definitely won't be here in 100 years time, but, you know, actually, are we actually ticking off any of those boxes? I think we still need to be talking about it. We need to be opening up the conversation and giving that awareness. So I think there will always be a set of topics that keep going around and until we get closer to showing that, yeah, women have got equality. Does that help?
It does. You're right. There has been progress. We shouldn't ignore the progress, but it looks, and also the progress is not necessarily in one direction. There are some times where we need also to shift into a different direction. And the point is more to make sure that we don't miss the boat when it's a question of adjusting our approach or changing approach. Because it can't be linear and it can't be the same battles, the same message, etc. Sometimes we need to change as well our ways to move forward.
I also think on some of the topics they will be resolved. You know, said menopause a lot of times in this. Be proud of me after last week. But I think that's it. As organisations actually become aware and, you know, establish their policies and you know, their flexibility around women's health issues, those will get ticked off. No doubt there will be new topics that come up behind that. But I think you're right about sort of the young, I'm going to call it young blood because I can actually, but that succession and having that change and having different people's sort of thoughts or that group sort of thought leadership, you know, it can't just be the same old or one person's.
Well, that's exactly why I joined the Gender Diversity Committee in my firm, because I was in a client meeting where I had two senior white men talking about how important maternity leave policy was important for gender diversity. I put my hand up and I said, sorry, but this is only a fraction of the story. And if we have senior people in the organization talking about this and only focusing on maternity leave, we're doomed. We need to talk about paternity leave as well, things like that. So yeah, that's important.
I think just opening up these conversations is
totally
the most important thing, and maybe that's a sort of plea, isn't it, to every woman, is to say, open up the conversation. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, but actually, to make it better, we might have to just stand that discomfort for.
Yeah. And I think on that topic, we need to think in every conversation there's an us. It's not just a you. If you're talking about pregnancy, you're talking about maternity and paternity. If you're talking about menopause, you're talking about what you feel and what I get from the back of that. We need those conversations about us.